Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, it is golf's third major of the year. That's right, we are here to break down the 2025 U.S. Open at Oakmont Country Club, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about this golf course, about this tournament, and everything you need to pick some winners for DFS betting and one and done here this week. And we're going to do it all here in 30 minutes or less, just like dominoes in the 2000s, 30 minutes or less guaranteed. Now, I will say it is a major, so we might go a little bit long, but really excited for this tournament, and hopefully we're going to have you guys give you guys all the information that you need in order to pick some winners this week, no matter what your game of choosing is. Now, this is coming off of a very good day. I'm recording this here on Sunday night. And I just hit an outright bet on Ryan Fox to win the RBC Canadian Open. Went over that bet on the show last Monday, talked about how he was a core play for me on Wednesday. My core was actually, I had Sam Burns, Ryan Fox, and Lee Hodges on my core. Also had Rory McIlroy. So aside from missing on Rory, like my non-Rory lineups did really, really well this week because I was all over Burns, I was all over Fox, and it was just a great week. Had a great breakdown of the RBC Canadian Open. And that was a course that we have not seen before on the PGA Tour. Well, now we head to Oakmont, and this is a course that we haven't seen in 9 years. And so hopefully I'm going to have the same quality breakdown that we had last week again this week. And hopefully we're going to be able to correctly identify and predict who is going to have a good week here at golf's third major. Now, if you have not already, we are closing in on our goal of having 1,000 subscribers. So please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. And hitting that 1,000 is going to be a huge milestone. It was about 2 years ago that we started on YouTube. We were an audio-only podcast for about a year and a half. And the U.S. Open at LACC was actually our first YouTube breakdown. So it'd be kind of cool to get to 1,000 subscribers 2 years later at the U.S. Open, all the way across the country from LACC at Oakmont. So if you've not already, please help me out. Hit that subscribe button, and you'll be able to be with us for the rest of our content through the rest of the PGA Tour season, as well as all of our best ball content coming your way this summer, and then college football, NFL, and college basketball content once the season starts. All right, went long enough on the introduction. Like I said, y'all, I'm excited. It's a U.S. Open. Let's go ahead and start breaking it down. All right, so to fully understand Oakmont, I think it is highly important to understand what the U.S. Open has looked like in the last 5 years and to understand how that is going to play into this week and how this week is going to be similar or different. So the USGA, when they generally set up a golf course, wants to create a very difficult test, and they want even par to end up kind of being the scoring goal at the end of the week. They have not had a U.S. Open finish over par since 2018 when Brooks Koepka won at Shinnecock Hills. I think that's a possibility here this week here at Oakmont. I think this is going to be the course where the difficulty is going to be ratcheted up all the way, and we're going to see carnage. We're going to see big numbers, and I think that that's what the USGA wants this week, and I think that's the test that we are going to get. The only way that this course could end up playing easier, which it kind of did in 2016, is if we get a lot of rain and the course ends up playing softer. As of Sunday, my recording this, I don't see rain in the forecast, so I think that this is going to be kind of a firm and fast U.S. Open. I think this is going to play quite difficult. So now how it plays difficult, though, here is going to be different than how it plays difficult at other U.S. Open venues, which are all quite difficult. So last year at Pinehurst and the year before at LACC, we had two kind of one archetype that won both tournaments, right? Those became driver putter tournaments. At Pinehurst, the fairways were wide enough that you could really just bomb away off the tee, and distance was a massive advantage at Pinehurst, and you really didn't know what you were going to get if you missed the fairway, but if you were just bombing it out there as far as you could, you were going to give yourself the best look possible. And then Pinehurst was also a course that you could not separate with your second shot because the greens were so firm and so fast and so undulating that if you were hitting middle to long iron into those greens, you just had no chance at getting the ball close, and you were just going to have to hope to make a 15-foot birdie putt or 2-putt for par. So the only way you could really separate at Pinehurst was with your driver, with your putter. LACC, the fairways were really wide. Everybody was hitting them, so distance became a massive advantage. And the greens were this very unique POA blend that, is kind of like what you see at Riviera, and guys were really able to get hot with the flat stick. And so you just saw at the top of the leaderboard a bunch of guys who are really good at driving the golf ball, really good at putting. Now, that is in direct contrast to the 2022 U.S. Open, which was at the Country Club, where the Country Club was marked by just being, super small landing zones, super precision required on every single golf shot. The fairways, if you were not landing the ball in the right spot, you were running into the rough. The greens were super small, so if you weren't hitting the green or weren't hitting the green in the right spot, you were having to scramble. And you just saw all these super precision-oriented golfers like Matt Fitzpatrick and Will Zalatoris and Colin Morikawa and Hideki Matsuyama have really good weeks there. It was not this bombs away week. But 2021 and 2020, at Torrey Pines and Winged Foot, you saw much of what I would think you're going to see here this week, which is a combination of bombers and fairway merchants that ruled the day. And I think that is going to be the case here. Let's talk about why. So Torrey Pines and Winged Foot were both courses that had super narrow fairways and super thick rough. And what ended up happening is this: your tee shot became super, super important, because if you did not hit a good tee shot, you were going to be screwed on your second shot. Basically, when you see courses with thick rough, right? If you are not super close to the hole on course with thick rough and you're in the rough, you have no chance. Like, you're just not getting a 6-iron out of this rough and hitting the green. It's just not happening. But if you're bombing it and you're Bryson DeChambeau at Winged Foot and you have a gap wedge from the rough, you can manage that and you can hit more greens than anybody else that way. Or option number 2 is to just hit more fairways than everybody else, right? So it's why you saw Harris English near the top of the leaderboard in 2020, how you saw Webb Simpson near the top of the leaderboard in 2020, right? Mackenzie Hughes in 2021 was a guy that was around for a long time, right? So you either have to be a distance guy or an accuracy guy. And if you're not, you're just going to be screwed. And I think that's going to be the name of the game here this week. Oakmont is very much a course where I do think you're going to be able to separate with your distance and also with your accuracy. This is not a super long golf course like most USGA setups. This is a par 70, but it's only going to play about 7,300 yards. For context, that's shorter than what we saw last week on the PGA Tour at TPC Toronto. It's only slightly longer than what we saw at Philly Cricket Club a few weeks back at the Truist Championship, in which everybody was kind of remarking at how short the course was. This is not a super long golf course. And oh, by the way, 300 of those 7,300 yards are on one of the most unique holes in golf, hole number 8, which is the longest par 3 in U.S. Open history. So you're just ending up with a really unique course setup here. But I think that the rough is going to be so thick. The name of the game is going to be either bombs away and hope to fish out your wedge from the rough, or hit as many fairways as you possibly can. Now, when you look back at that leaderboard in 2016, Dustin Johnson was the winner, right? Dustin Johnson is a great driver of the golf ball. He's also a great ball striker. And what you tended to see at the top of the leaderboard in that 2016 tournament is you just saw a whole lot of ball strikers, right? Jim Furyk, Shane Lowry, Sergio Garcia, Brandon Grace. These are guys that aren't necessarily known for being great putters of the golf ball, but they're just guys that are known for their ball striking, guys who are really proficient off the tee, guys who are really, really good on approach. And so to me, that's going to be another thing that I'm going to look for this week, is I'm going to look for guys who are just ball strikers, right? And the greens here at Oakmont are said to be some of the fastest in the entire world. I think that's like an actual possibility. Like, the greens here are going to play super, super fast, but I don't think you necessarily have to be a great putter. Like, I think putting at US Opens, because they're so evil with the pin locations, because everything's so difficult, I hate to say it, but I think putting at US Opens can kind of be a little bit luck based in a way. Like, I know that's kind of like a taboo word in golf is the word luck, right? But like let's be honest, you don't know who's going to have a good putting week before we tee it up here this week. There's certain guys that are more likely than others, but if a guy shows up and their ball striking is good and they just happen to have the time of their life putting, then they could end up winning the golf tournament. But the bottom line is, you have to hit the green in order for that putting to matter. And so that is why I'm going to be focusing heavily on the first and second shot this week when I'm looking at different golfers that I'm going to target. So with that being said, we mentioned all that about the U.S. Opens, right? Well, let's look at who have been the best guys at the U.S. Opens in the last, or really, I guess, in perpetuity. And that's Xander Schauffele, Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, Hideki Matsuyama, right? Like, all those guys are not necessarily like perfectly fitting the mold of what I'm looking at, but they're all guys that, have historically played well in US Opens. And so, when you're looking at US Opens, I definitely think that, Winged Foot in 2020 and Torrey Pines in 2021 are more so like what we've seen, what we're going to see here this week than the last 3 US Opens at the Country Club or at LACC or at Pinehurst, right? So Now, let's go ahead and break down. We've done this every single week, our key stats for the week. So, as always, every single week, I really do think that stroke gain approach is going to be super important. I don't think that this is going to be just a driver putter golf course. I'm also looking at greens and regulation percentage or greens and regulation percentage gained, because what I do think matters there is if you're able to hit more greens than everybody else, it doesn't matter your pathway to doing so. But if you're able to hit more greens, you're just going to give yourself the most opportunities to make birdies, which is going to be vital. Like, this is the type of course where it's going to be super hard to scramble no matter where you are. So if you know that there's going to be bogeys on your card, you're going to have to be able to offset that with birdies. So I want to find guys that are going to be able to make some birdies. I'm also going to be looking at total driving. So I mentioned that, the pathway this week is you either need to be long or accurate. I'm going to be looking at both those stats, but I do think total driving is worth looking at as well, because if you're both long and accurate, then that means that you're going to have a pathway to one or the other or both being a key to your success here this week. And then I'm going to look at strokes gained around the green and scrambling. Now, with the geographical location of this golf course being in Pennsylvania, with it being kind of like the northeastern agronomy of being East Coast POA greens, I'm not going to necessarily be looking at putting on POA grass this week, because most POA is found on the West Coast. It's not the same as what you're going to see here on the East Coast. So I'm not looking at a specific grass type or anything, but I do think that a lot of the courses in this area of the country that are very long, very difficult, and feature thick rough are courses that you can look at for comp courses, right? And those are Winged Foot, we already mentioned. Muirfield Village is a second one. Olympia Fields, home of the 2020 and 2023 BMW Championships. And then Philadelphia Cricket Club. Those are going to be my 4 comp courses this week for Oakmont. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to dive down the rabbit hole. All right. So as we mentioned at the top, you got to be long or accurate this week. So first thing I'm looking at is I'm going to be looking at driving distance. And so the top 5 in the field in driving distance in this field are Bryson DeChambeau, Jon Rahm, Joaquin Niemann, Jose Luis Ballester, and Noah Kent. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this, guys. When I say rabbit hole, I'm not referring to an actual rabbit hole. I'm referring to the rabbit hole, which is a tool from BetSperts Golf that allows you to use all different kinds of filters and conditions in order to isolate the micro skills that you want for specific golfers on specific weeks. It has allowed me to really find some guys I might not have otherwise. And one of those guys is Ryan Fox last week. So the rabbit hole works. I cannot recommend it enough. Now, we mentioned that distance is important. Let's go ahead and talk about accuracy. So who are the most accurate guys in the field in the calendar year 2025? Well, you end up with a lot of guys with small sample sizes, right? We've got Evan Beck, Justin Hicks, Richard Bland, Alvaro Ortiz, and Tyrrell Hatton is the top 5. Let's extend that list to get some guys that we know, like on the PGA Tour and live, they're like actually accurate. Aaron Rai, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Reed, Laurie Cantor, Lucas Glover, Seb Straka, Sung J M. How's that for a top 12? Like we finally got the accuracy merchants there at the end. Then I want to look at total driving, because if you're not like super, super long or super, super accurate, but you're kind of good in both, then you have a pathway this week, right? Because you could just get really hot one way or the other. Tyrrell Hatton's number 1, followed by Bryson DeChambeau, Jon Rahm, Laurie Cantor, Phil Mickelson, Scotty Scheffler, Justin Hastings, Taylor Pendrith, Patrick Reed, Sung J M as your top 10 there. The list is very live-centric because the live guys don't have a whole lot of data to go off of. Some other PGA Tour guys that are near the top: Daniel Berger, Corey Connors, Keegan Bradley, Davis Thompson, Siwoo Kim, Robert McIntyre, Ludwig Oberg. All right, now let's get to some specific filters, right? Because I wanted to mention those 3 specific off the tee stats, but now let's take a look at this. How about total or strokes gained off the tee on courses with thick rough only? Scotty Scheffler, Bryson DeChambeau, Rory McIlroy, Corey Connors, Keegan Bradley as our top 5. Total driving on courses with thick rough only, because I think the defining feature off the tee this week is going to be the thick rough. Tyrrell Hatton, Scotty Scheffler, James Hahn, Keegan Bradley, and Jackson Buchanan. Don't even know who that is. Now, next thing I want to look at is if we've got thick rough, who are the guys who are best in the field at hitting greens from the rough on courses with thick rough? Bryson DeChambeau, Ryan McCormick, Matt Wallace, Adam Scott, and Lanto Griffin. Because let's face it, you're going to be in the rough this week. So if you're going to be in the rough, you got to be able to hit the green from the rough. Now, next up I wanted to look at was just last 50 rounds strokes gained approach. Who are the best iron merchants in the field? Scotty Scheffler, Seb Straka, Shane Lowry, Colin Morikawa, and Victor Hovland as your top 5. From a greens and regulation perspective, who are the guys in the field who are just hitting the most greens? We got Scotty Scheffler, Joaquin Niemann, Jon Rahm, Aaron Rai, and Shane Lowry. Next up, we want to look at kind of those 2 stats that we talked about. I want you to be able to scramble in case you do not hit the green. This is going to be looking at courses that are average or difficult. Best in the field at scrambling. Scotty Scheffler, Hideki Matsuyama, Matt McCarty, Rory McIlroy, and Patrick Reed. And then I also want to look at birdie or better on courses that are at least average difficulty because, like I said, you're going to have to be able to make birdies and you're also going to have to scramble this week. Best in the field, Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, Bryson DeChambeau, Davis Riley, and Scotty Scheffler. And then par fours on at least average difficulty golf courses because, with there only being 2 par 5s here at Oakmont, you're going to have to be able to make some birdies on these par 4s. Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, John Rahm. Oh, I'm sorry. Scotty Scheffler's number 1. Then McIlroy, Morikawa, Rahm, and DeChambeau as your top 5. Then strokes gained putting on just fast greens. We got Denny McCarthy, Max Grazerman, Harris English, Sam Burns, Thomas Dietrich. Strokes gained total on very difficult golf courses only. Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Bryson DeChambeau, Xander Schauffele, Rory McIlroy. Strokes gained total at majors only since COVID. We've got Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, and Tommy Fleetwood. And then just my comp courses who are the best in the field. We've got Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, and Colin Morikawa as our top 5 there. Now, when you throw all that into a custom model, what does it pop out? No surprise. Number 1 golfer in the field, Scotty Scheffler. Like I said, no surprise, right? He is the best golfer in the world. The run he is on is absolutely insane. And I think that because of the well-roundedness of Scotty's game now, right? Like he's one of the best total drivers in the world because he's both above average in distance and accuracy. He is the best approach player in the world from all distances. And he's one of the best scramblers in the world, and he's turning into an above-average putter. There's no weaknesses in Scotty's game. His course management skills and the way he kind of navigates around golf courses is second to none. And he has a history of winning majors. He's won 3 of them. He has a history of winning difficult golf courses. He just won at Memorial. I just have no holes to poke in Scotty Scheffler's game, right? Like he is very clearly the number 1 golfer in the field. And I think that is quite evident in the betting odds. I think that is quite evident in the DFS pricing. And if you had to pick one golfer this week for any purpose, Scotty Scheffler's got to be your guy, right? Now, after Scotty Scheffler, we're going to talk about this in the DFS section, but after Scotty Scheffler, here's how the model has it ranked. Bryson DeChambeau, Colin Morikawa, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele rounding out the top 5. Now, what's interesting here to me is the placement of Morikawa, but Morikawa is up there. You can see it in the stats. It's because of his accuracy off the tee and is because of his approach play and in his par 4 scoring, right? Like he's just very good at courses where accuracy matters and approach play matters. And even though it's been kind of hit or miss lately for Morikawa, it's kind of been a disappointing season for Morikawa. He hasn't been inside the 10th position on the leaderboard since the beginning of March. Like that's 3 months ago. As much of a disappointment of a season it is for Morikawa, the course fit for Morikawa is something real. Like he really does fit this course well, in my opinion, because of his accuracy, because of his approach play, because of his ability to play well in difficult conditions. Now, after that top 5, Corey Connors, number 6. That's an interesting one. Corey Connors coming in high because he's very accurate off the tee. He's very good at courses with thick rough. He's just a very good approach player. Rates out really well at difficult golf courses. Corey Connors, number 6. I think that's a pretty good spot for him. And you always worry about Corey Connors with the putter. Well, you look at what he's been doing recently, and he's been putting well. He putted very well at the Memorial. He putted very well at the PGA Championship. Don't have the official numbers from the RBC Canadian Open in here just yet, but wasn't a bad showing there. And I kind of think that it's a pretty good spot for Corey Connors, right? Like, and we talk about pricing in DFS. He's absolutely a misprice where he is at on DraftKings. More on that when we get to that board. But number 7 is going to be John Rahm. Number 8, Tommy Fleetwood. Number 9, Patrick Cantlay. And number 10, Russell Henley. Now, I'm going to be tinkering with this model all week long, y'all. So if you would like to know the final top 10 of the model, this is just the first run through. Final top 10 of the model is available on Wednesdays on the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. In that article every week, I post the top 10 for the model, as well as my DFS core plays on DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as a big write-up as to why they are my core plays. So if you want to access that information, go ahead, head on over to the Patreon. If you want more information from me, also, you can follow me on Twitter, or you can join the Fantasy Corner Discord. The Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a bunch of really smart people who play DFS for bunch of different sports: golf, NBA, MLB, NFL, college football is just popping in there, like every sport. And so if you want a DFS community of a bunch of really smart people to bounce ideas off of, to talk strategies with, and sweat it out together, Fantasy Corner Discord is a place for you. All right, let's take a quick breather now and let's take a look at the board for DFS betting and one and done and talk about some picks and some strategy. All right, so when it comes to DFS and betting this week, I'm pretty much dividing the entire pool of golfers into three sections. It's the big four, it's the tier 2 golfer, and then it's everybody else. And so what I mean by the big four is I'm talking about Scheffler, McIlroy, DeChambeau, and Rahm. When I talk about the tier 2 golfer, I'm talking everybody from Xander down to about Hideki, right? Like I'm talking Xander, Collin, Ludwig, Cantlay, Thomas, Fleetwood, Neiman, Hovland, Koepka, Matsuyama. Everybody 8K and above in DraftKings. And then everybody else is obviously just everybody else, right? So when it comes to making a bet this week, here is how I am personally viewing this week. I am going to be betting on whichever one of the big four that I feel the most comfortable with: Scheffler, McIlroy, DeChambeau, and Rahm. And then I'm probably going to be betting on a long shot that's not in that tier 2 golfer. So somebody below, say, 40 to 1 on the odds boards, right? Because at the end of the day, what I think is very likely to happen this week, I think it is very, very likely that one of the big four wins this golf tournament: Scheffler, McIlroy, DeChambeau, Rahm. Like I just can't shake the feeling that one of those guys is going to end up winning. And I don't want to be like on the wrong side of that, because like it's simply no fun to have a bet on a guy and you just see Scotty at the top of the leaderboard and Scotty's just inevitable and Scotty's going to win, right? Like it's no fun to be on the other side of that. So I want to pick which one of those four I like the best, whatever odds I like the best, and ride with that. Because let's be honest, like those four just feel like they're in a class of their own. Like if you were to ask me the question, hey, who's most likely to beat Scotty over 72 holes? It's the guys that have done it in major championships in the last 2 years, right? Rory doing it at the Masters and the U.S. Open last year. DeChambeau doing it at the U.S. Open last year, almost doing it at the Masters this year. Rahm doing it at the Masters in 2023 at the Open last year, right? Like those are the guys that I feel like can beat Scotty over 72 holes. I suppose you could throw Xander in that discussion, but this 2025 Xander has not been what we saw from Xander in 2024. Xander in 2025 has not finished inside the top 8 in an event all year. So why would he do it now at the U.S. Open? So I really think that it's just those big four. I think everything revolves around those big four, right? Now in DFS, I'm going to pretty much set a rule like I want one of those big four in my lineup, because what that's going to do is it's going to give me the most win equity, and it's going to kind of bucket my lineups, right? Is I'm going to have my Scheffler lineups, my McIlroy lineups, my DeChambeau lineups, my Rahm lineups from there. And what that's going to do is it's just going to make sure that if I truly believe one of those four guys is going to win the golf tournament, I'm going to have lineups with all four of those guys, right? What it also does is, because of the way the pricing is constructed this week, I think DraftKings has actually done a very poor job with pricing in DFS. I think FanDuel has done a much more fair job. In terms of the DraftKings pricing, if you click Scheffler, you got 71.20 remaining. I can make a pretty comfortable lineup with just skipping those tier 2 golfers, right? Honestly. Like, and so here's what really begs the question. Like, if I'm so sold on Scheffler, which my custom model is telling me I should be, my eye test is telling me I should be, history's trends are telling me I should be. The only difference between Scheffler and the other guys, like if I start my lineup off with Rahm, the average remaining is 79.60 with Rahm, and that would theoretically force me to go play some of those tier 2 guys, right? And so the only difference between Scheffler and Rahm is like what it allows you to do with the rest of your lineup. And let's go ahead and talk about the tier 2 guys. I'm not sold on any of these tier 2 guys, from Xander all the way down to Hideki and DraftKings pricing. I'm just not sold on any of them. All of these guys have been disappointments on the PGA Tour so far this year. All of these guys have not shown the ability to consistently beat Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy, for that matter, over 72 holes, or even Bryson and Rahm over 72 holes in majors. I'm just not really sold on him. And I'm not going to be playing a whole lot of them in DFS. I'm not going to be betting any of them outright. And I'm totally fine to just be under the field in this tier 2 of golfer. Like DraftKings is basically set up the pricing in direct accordance with what my working theory on the PGA Tour this year has been, which is that Scotty and Rory are in a class of their own. And in majors, I think you can throw Bryson and Rahm in there. And the tier 2 golfer is underachieving. And after that, you have other guys that are not in the tier 2, like Lowry, like Straka, like Russell Henley, who have shown well in other events and are just as good as these tier 2 guys without being priced like these tier 2 guys. And so I'm largely going to be fading this entire section. Now, my model is telling me that I should like Colin Morikawa, so I'm probably going to get me a little Morikawa, even though like I'm just so frustrated with playing him and everything. I also think that of anybody in this section, which is the guy that, like, just in terms of the eye test, could I most likely see winning this major? I think I would go with Victor Hovland. I think that, this area of the country, he tends to play really well, has a win at Olympia Fields. He's really good on approach recently. I just really think that out of anybody, he's probably the guy I would lean the most with. But honestly, and I'm probably going to catch some heat for people for saying this because this guy's very polarizing. I've seen this bunch of losers lose to Scotty all season long. The two live guys in this range, Joaquin Niemann and Brooks Koepka, I've only seen lose to Scotty twice. And Joaquin Niemann is coming off of the best start of his major career at the PGA Championship, right? Like, I am not like the biggest Niemann guy. Like, I've largely felt like he's overpriced in like DraftKings, in the betting market, and people's perception of him because of his lack of success in majors. But this year, he looked really good at the PGA. And if I'm not sold on any of the guys priced around him anyway, then why would I not just roll the dice on him? And Brooks Koepka, you've only got like a 5-time major winner. Now, granted, he's looked like absolute booty this year. I'm censoring myself there because I like to keep a family show. He's looked awful this year. And even though he has, that just means nobody's going to play him. And you're telling me you really want to fade Brooks Koepka in major championships? Like I played him at the PGA. He was 2% owned in DFS. And I'm like, oh, sweet, I got 2% owned Brooks Koepka. And he was awful. But at the same time, if Brooks Koepka is only 2% owned, you're giving me one of the best major players of the last 25 years at 2% ownership in DFS. I'm going to feel pretty good about that, right? So now that takes care of my general strategy, right? Like, so at the end of the day, if I'm not playing Scotty, then I'm going to be playing either Rory or Bryson or Rahm. And what I'm probably going to be looking to do if I'm not playing a Scotty lineup is probably get 2 of those 3 guys in there, because I really do think that a DeChambeau Rahm lineup that leaves you 7,200 remaining, that's actually more average salary remaining than just playing Scotty. So I really think that that's going to be kind of the build that I'm going to go with. Is I'm going to be mostly fading the tier 2 golfer, as I've been calling them, and I'm going to be looking for the rest of the guys. Now, with that being said, who are the rest of the guys that I'm going to be looking at? Well, I think that $700 range or $7,000 range is a great start. I think that Shane Lowry is in a great spot. He looked pretty good at the RBC Canadian Open, made a little run on Sunday, right? Just one of the PGA Tour's best approach players, and it's still looking really good. And he was really good here at Oakmont last time. Like, he had a lead heading into Sunday. And with Shane, the question is, if he can putt, and all he needs is the putter to just be barely positive, and you get a T2 finish like he did at the Truist, right? And that's all we need out of Shane. And if we get that out of Shane, Shane can win a major championship. We've seen it happen before. Now, outside of Shane, I love Seb Straka. And anecdotally, Seb Straka has been really good at the golf courses that Shane Lowry has been good at in his PGA Tour career. They were 1-2 at the Truist Championship. They both have a whole lot of success at the Honda Classic. So I just think it makes a whole lot of sense to play either both of them together or at least one of them. And those are going to be 2 of my guys here heading into this week. Now, I do think that Lowry and Straka both do make really good outright bets to win this golf tournament. But in DFS, I do think they're going to be quite popular. So I do think that, if you're playing DFS, factor in ownership. You don't want to just factor in all the guys that everybody else is going to be playing. So the good news is, though, is after those 2 guys, like the rest of the 7K range, to me, there just seems to be so many options that I don't see any of them being super highly owned, because there's just so many of them that the ownership is going to end up being spread out as people play their favorite, right? Now, Corey Connors is probably going to be one of my favorites. We already talked about him a little bit earlier. I just think that he is a straight up mispriced from where he's at. He's coming in on really good form. He's a guy that's really going to find fairways and find greens, and that's what we want here this week at the end of the day. I also do think Russell Henley is kind of sneaky. One thing about U.S. Opens, when guys win the U.S. Open or guys that play well at the U.S. Open, it tends to come in off of really good form in either their last start or their last major. So I want guys to kind of have one of those two boxes checked. And so Russell Henley, even though he's missed the cut at both majors so far this year, his last start was a T5 at the Memorial, which is one of my comp courses here this week. Tony Finau is playing some sneaky, really good golf, really good in this area of the country, really good in U.S. Opens. I don't mind him at 7,300. And then at the bottom of the 7K range in DraftKings, you just have all these guys that are coming in really, really good form. Ben Griffin, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, all going to be popular, all going to be really sensible plays, in my opinion, all coming in really, really good form, particularly Ben Griffin. Now, in the 6K range, I think there's less options than in 7K, but I do think there's some that make a lot of sense, right? Like I think Siwoo Kim makes a lot of sense. He's just a fairway finder. He hasn't finished outside of 31st place since April. Like that's quite impressive that he's had a 2-month run where he's just playing really, really good golf. And if we look at this kind of statistical reason why, Siwoo Kim is just he's just pretty well-rounded at this point in his career, right? There's not really a whole lot of weaknesses in his game. It used to be the putter, but he's been putting well recently. And it does worry me a little bit that his irons have kind of given up on him, but historically, Siwoo Kim, really good iron player, not necessarily super worried that the last 2 starts have been a little bit poor in that regard. Now, going through the rest of the 6K range, I'm going to mention them just because I mention them every major. Robert McIntyre, Akshay Bhatia. I think that those two guys, they got the goods. They're going to win a major championship eventually, and I really do like their chances, and I'm probably going to be playing them in DFS this week. Not sure if I'm going to get there as an outright bet. Now, there's 2 guys that I think are going to be super chalky in the 6K range in DFS this week. And it's because they make the most sense in the world. Harris English, coming off of a 12th place finish at the Memorial and a runner-up at the PGA, is a guy that has a great track record at U.S. Opens, was 3rd, I believe, at Winged Foot, and was also in the running on Sunday at Torrey Pines. Like, that's just kind of what he does. Let me double-check this. Harris English. For some reason, the stats are not popping up in the correct way here. Let me go ahead and search this. I apologize for the delay. But yeah, I think Harris English, he just makes all the most sense in the world because of his performance at the U.S. Open and because of what he has done recently. Oh, I see what I did. Apparently, you have to type in periods for U and S in this database. My bad. Yeah, he was 4th at Winged Foot and 3rd at Torrey Pines. So Harris English, good U.S. Open track record, good recent form coming in. I think he's going to be chalky. I also think that Cam Young is going to be chalky off of what he did on Sunday at the RBC Heritage. Just makes all the sense in the world for people to go back to him after, he was being that close to a win. And then, so if those 2 guys are going to be chalky, I don't want to play both of them in the same lineup. I do think that they both make sense. And so one guy I think that's a little under the radar that I do like is Taylor Pendrith. Really good total driver of the golf ball, really good at the PGA, really good at the Memorial. And those are courses that kind of like accuracy at the end of the day kind of did help out a lot at those 2 courses. And I think that might be the case here. Really do like really do like Taylor Pendrith. And Davis Thompson, I think he's not playing his best golf, but I do think in terms of a course fit, I do think that it is a good course fit for Davis Thompson. Aaron Rai, I feel the same way about coming in off back-to-back miscuts where his putter absolutely betrayed him. And I kind of hope he gets an ownership discount because I kind of consider myself an Aaron Rai truther and will probably be going back to him. Andrew Novak is the 6K guy who's coming in really good form, although the last start, the Memorial, does leave a little bit to be desired. He just playing great golf until then, and I kind of get if people want to go with him. I got to be honest, though, from a DraftKings perspective, the 5K range is quite bad. So I don't necessarily have a whole lot of guys that I want to go with in the 5K range. I do like at the bottom of the 6K, Bud Cauley and Ryan Gerard, just 2 guys with well-rounded games, really good ball strikers, really good form coming in. I like both of them. Vic Perez showed up well in Canada and just has this odd resume of like being able to pop at random courses. And I kind of don't mind getting to him at 5,900, I guess. But like I said, it gets quite ugly here in the 5K range on DraftKings. I definitely don't want to be sniffing at the bottom of the board. I don't want to put myself in that position. If I were to have to pick anybody, if you're going with the ball striker narrative, Jonathan Vegas makes a lot of sense coming off of the T5 at the PGA Championship for his last major. I also really think Matt McCarty's pretty good as well. He did miss the cut at the PGA, but he was T14 at the Masters, coming off of a T4 at the RBC Canadian Open. This guy's got a really good short game, and his irons can get hot as well. I kind of think in the 5K range, he's probably going to be the guy that I would end up going with. All right, now let's go ahead. I'm over my 30-minute time limit just a little bit, but let's go ahead and very briefly talk one and done, right? So when it comes to one and dones, it is getting to be crunch time in one and done season, right? Basically, when you look at the calendar, we have 5 big events left. We've got the U.S. Open and the Travelers. We've got the Open, and then we've got the 2 playoff events, the FedEx St. Jude and the BMW. So what you need to be doing right now is mapping out the golfers that you have left strategically for these 5 events, right? You've got 2 majors, which you can use live guys at, and then you've got the Travelers, the FedEx St. Jude, the BMW, which are PGA Tour events or signature events that will not feature a cut and will feature the top whatever PGA Tour players, right? So you need to be rationing your players to get your big guns at those 5 events. And so looking at it this week, I think there's a very simple flow chart this week, right? Do you have Bryson DeChambeau? If yes, play him. You don't want Bryson DeChambeau at the Open. You don't want to go a whole season without playing Bryson DeChambeau. It allows you to play another one of your big guns later on in the season. If no, do you have Jon Rahm? Yes or no? If so, what you need to do is you need to make the decision on whether or not you're going to use Jon Rahm here or Jon Rahm at the Open. Jon Rahm actually has a pretty good Open resume as well, because like Bryson DeChambeau, I don't think you want to go a whole season without using Jon Rahm, and you only have 2 chances left to do it. So that would be what I would be looking at. I am opting to, in the one where I do have Bryson DeChambeau available, to play him here. And when I don't have Bryson DeChambeau here, I'm going to be playing Jon Rahm, because I feel like maybe I can find another live guy that will work at Portrush. Maybe it's Neiman, maybe it's Hatton, maybe it's Koepka, maybe it's Cam Smith. I feel like I can find one of those guys there and just use Rahm here. Maybe if you want to get a little different, I think Neiman would probably be the play instead of Rahm. Here, you could go Neiman here and then Rahm at the Open, but I do think that you want to make sure that you use Bryson and Rahm before the season's over, like absolutely 100%, right? So if you have them, use them here this week. But like I said, you need to consider rationing your players, right? So what using the live guys does here is it allows you to have more guys available for the Travelers and the playoff events, right? And so like if you look at what I've got going on here in my one and done, the one that I've been picking here on the show, I've already selected Jon Rahm, but if you look at who I have left, it's nobody near the top of the odds boards. Like I've already used Rory, I've already used Scotty, I already used Bryson, I already used Xander. So like being able to use 2 more of those guys down the course of the season is worth it. And like I've been super aggressive in this one and done. So one thing I do feel pretty comfortable with is that, like, looking further back at the board, there are some guys that I can feel comfortable using at the remaining elevated events. I got Sepp, I got Victor, I got Connors, I got Henley, right? Like I got Ben Griffin, who's playing really well. So I feel comfortable that I can find spots to use those guys. What you can't do is get 2 extra spots. And so by playing the live guys, you get yourself those 2 extra spots. That to me is the predominant strategy here in one and done this week, is to use your live guys while you have them in these last 2 majors. But all right, y'all, that's going to do it for the U.S. Open preview. Like I said, haven't really made any bets yet. Haven't made any determinations in terms of like the DFS lineup yet. But like I said, when it comes to DFS, I'm getting me one of the big 4, if not 2 of the big 4. And then I'm going to be backfilling with a lot of that 7K range, of which I think a lot of them are going to be popular. But I do think that a lot of them are going to end up being some of the best plays on the slate, because they have been this season as good as the tier 2 golfer, and they have not been priced up to the same as the tier 2 golfer, as I've been mentioned. And that working theory that I've kind of had all season long about that second tier PGA Tour player being underachieving and being a letdown could come to fruition again this week, or it could not. If one of those guys ends up winning and it beats me, then I'm fine with that. But I really think that I'm staying with my strategy. I'm staying with what I've held all season long, and I think it's going to come into fruition here this week again at the U.S. Open. But anyway, That is going to do it for this week, y'all. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. It really helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I really do appreciate it. If you're listening on audio, you can rate and review. Again, helps me out a ton. I cannot stress that enough. And then if you have not already, make sure you're subscribed. Help us get to our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the summer is over. I would greatly appreciate if you guys could do that. But with that being said, that's it for us this week, y'all. It's U.S. Open week. It's Father's Day week. It should be a great week to watch some golf. Personally, this is my last week of school. I've talked about on numerous times on the podcast how I teach high school math and I coach high school girls flag football and high school basketball, boys basketball. And so, yeah, this is like starting my off season, right? Like I get to be at home a little bit more often. And this week I've got some teacher work days coming up near the end of the week where I will be able to have the iPad on at work and just be able to watch the US Open and watch all the carnage unfold, because I do think there is going to be carnage this week. I do not think that this is going to be a -10 US Open. I think that this is going to play quite difficult. But anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this up, y'all. Enough opining about how much I love this week and how much I love this event. Let's go ahead and get on out of here. Hopefully we are able to give you guys some winners if you're playing DFS, one and done, or outright betting. Leave us a like and subscribe. Help spread the word for this podcast if you can. It is major week, so there are more eyes this week on us than any other week. So if you could tell a friend, that's also greatly appreciated. But let's go ahead and get on out of here. Best of luck to you guys this week at the US Open. Hope you guys enjoy watching it like I do. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.